Imagine a vast empire that stretched across 3 continents, ruled for more than 600 years, and shaped the modern world in ways most people don't even realize. The Ottoman Empire is often remembered for its wars, its sultans, and the dramatic fall of Constantinople. But hidden beneath the battles and the palaces are secrets you were never taught in school. Secrets about how this empire ruled not just with armies, but with innovation, culture, and systems so unusual they sound like something out of fiction. Let's start with one of the most shocking institutions in world history, the Janissaries. Forget what you know about ordinary soldiers. These men were part of an elite military force that served as the backbone of the empire for centuries. But they weren't born into it, they were taken as children. Through a system called the Devshirme, Christian boys from the Balkans were collected as a form of tribute to the Sultan. They were removed from their families, converted to Islam, and trained in the arts of war and administration. It was a practice both feared and respected, a system that turned outsiders into insiders, and enemies into protectors of the empire. What's even more surprising is how effective this was. The Janissaries became one of the first standing armies in Europe, long before nations like France or England created permanent professional soldiers. They were known for their discipline, loyalty, and terrifying presence on the battlefield. Unlike feudal armies that could fall apart when lords abandoned the king, the Janissaries were salaried, trained, and fully devoted to the Sultan. They gave the Ottoman Empire an edge that helped it expand rapidly across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. And yet, the Janissaries weren't just fighters. They rose to high positions in politics and administration. Some became grand viziers, the equivalent of prime ministers. This meant the empire wasn't simply run by hereditary nobility, but by men whose entire lives had been shaped by the Ottoman system itself. While the Janissaries gave the empire its strength, it was culture that gave it endurance. The Ottoman Empire wasn't just a military machine, it was a civilization that wove together the traditions of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East into something entirely new. And some of its cultural innovations still echo in our daily lives today. Take, for example, the coffeehouse. Today, we take cafes for granted, places to gather, argue, exchange ideas, and relax with friends. But the world's first coffeehouses appeared in Ottoman lands in the 16th century. In cities like Istanbul, they weren't just about drinking coffee. They became centers of debate, performance, and politics. Musicians, poets, and storytellers filled the rooms. Philosophers and ordinary citizens alike gathered to discuss the issues of the day. In many ways, Ottoman coffeehouses were the ancestors of modern public spaces, the birthplace of cafe culture that would later spread to Europe and then across the globe. Another secret of the empire lies in its architecture. The Ottomans inherited the traditions of the Byzantine and Islamic worlds, but under the genius of architects like Mimar Sinan, they created something breathtakingly their own. Sinan, a former Janissary turned imperial architect, designed mosques, bridges, and aqueducts that still inspire awe centuries later. His works, like the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul, weren't just religious buildings, they were masterpieces of engineering and urban design. Sinan's designs influenced not only Ottoman cities, but inspired styles across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. And then there's the empire's role as a true crossroads of culture. Few places in history have brought together so many peoples under one political system. Turks, Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Slavs, and Jews all lived within Ottoman borders. Markets in Istanbul sold spices from India, silk from China, silver from the Balkans. Beyond culture and architecture, the Ottomans left behind another set of secrets: the systems of law, trade, and science that allowed their empire to last for centuries. These weren't just political tools, they were groundbreaking innovations that influenced how people lived and how nations interacted long after the empire itself was gone. Let's start with the law. The Ottoman Empire operated under Islamic law, or Sharia, but it didn't stop there. The sultans introduced a parallel set of secular laws, known as Kanun. These laws covered areas of life that religious law didn't directly address, such as taxation, land ownership, and criminal justice. By blending religious law with a flexible secular system, the Ottomans created a legal framework that was far more adaptable than many of their European rivals. It allowed them to govern a population that was incredibly diverse in language, culture, and faith, without collapsing under the weight of contradictions. Trade was another cornerstone of Ottoman power. Sitting at the literal crossroads of Europe and Asia, the empire controlled key routes of the Silk Road. This meant goods from China, India, Africa, and Europe all passed through Ottoman lands. Spices, silk, ceramics, and precious metals filled the markets of Istanbul, turning it into one of the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan cities in the world. The Ottomans weren't just middlemen. They actively managed and taxed these trade networks, enriching the empire and tying distant economies together. But here's the part that surprises many people. The Ottomans also invested heavily in science and medicine. They built observatories, hospitals, and libraries that preserved and advanced knowledge. Ottoman scholars studied astronomy to refine calendars and navigation. Physicians in the empire wrote medical texts that blended Islamic, Byzantine, and European traditions, treating patients with herbal remedies, surgery, and early hospital systems. Cartographers created maps that helped sailors chart new waters during the Great Age of exploration. One famous example is Taqi ad-Din, an Ottoman astronomer and engineer who worked in the 16th century. He built one of the most advanced observatories of his time, rivaling those in Europe. He also wrote about mechanical clocks and even described early steam-powered devices. While his contributions have often been overshadowed by Galileo or Kepler, his work shows just how much intellectual energy was flowing through the Ottoman world. So, when we talk about the empire, it's easy to picture sultans in palaces or soldiers in battle. But behind that, there was a sophisticated legal code that blended faith with practicality, a trading empire that linked continents, and a scientific culture that pushed boundaries. These systems didn't just keep the Ottomans in power, they helped shape the legal, economic, and intellectual frameworks of the world we live in today. Empires are often remembered for their rulers and wars, but to truly understand the Ottomans, you have to look at the everyday life inside their borders. And here too, we find secrets that reveal just how complex and surprising this empire really was. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Ottoman life is the harem. In popular culture, it's often reduced to exotic fantasies of luxury and indulgence, but in reality, the imperial harem was far more political than people realize. It was the private household of the sultan, yes, but it was also a center of power. Women inside the harem, particularly the mothers of sultans, wielded enormous influence over state affairs. Some women became political advisors, maneuvering behind the scenes to shape decisions at the highest level. Far from being powerless, many women of the harem used their position to secure alliances, influence succession, and even direct policy. Then, there's the food. The Ottomans ruled a vast and fertile land that connected different parts of the world, and their kitchens reflected this diversity. Spices from Asia, grains from the Balkans, fruits from the Mediterranean, and coffee from Yemen all came together to form a cuisine that still influences the region today. Foods we now think of as quintessentially Middle Eastern or Mediterranean, like baklava, kebabs, and stuffed vegetables, were perfected in Ottoman kitchens. Even the global coffee culture that fuels so much of our daily lives today has Ottoman roots. Religious life in the empire also contained unexpected surprises. While the Ottomans were an Islamic empire, they developed a system that allowed Christians, Jews, and other groups to practice their faiths under the millet system. Each religious community had a degree of autonomy, with its own leaders handling education, marriage, and internal disputes. For its time, this was remarkably tolerant compared to the religious persecution happening elsewhere, especially in Europe. It wasn't perfect, and there were still restrictions, but it was a level of pluralism unusual for the era, and daily life itself reflected this diversity. Ottoman cities were melting pots where you might hear Greek in one neighborhood, Armenian in another, and Arabic in the markets. Music, clothing, and customs mixed and adapted. The result was a society society where, despite deep differences, people coexisted within a single imperial framework. The secrets of Ottoman life remind us that empires are not just military conquests or grand palaces. They are lived experiences, full of power struggles behind closed doors, kitchens blending flavors from across continents, and communities finding ways to live together despite their differences. These everyday realities made the Ottoman Empire not just vast, but vibrant, and they explain how it was able to endure for more than 6 centuries. When most people think of the Ottoman Empire, they picture battles, sieges, and sultans in magnificent palaces. But as we've seen, the real secrets of this empire lie in the details, in the systems, the culture, and the everyday life that gave it endurance. The Janissaries showed how the empire could take a controversial system and turn it into one of the most effective fighting forces in history. The coffeehouses and architecture revealed how culture could bind people together and spark new ideas. The laws, trade networks, and scientific centers proved the Ottomans weren't just conquerors, but also builders of complex systems that shaped economies and knowledge across continents. And the food, the harem, and the millet system showed a side of the empire rarely discussed, one of surprising tolerance, hidden power, and cultural exchange. This was not a monolithic empire. It was a world within a world, a blend of peoples, faiths, and innovations that survived for more than 600 years. And even today, echoes of the Ottoman Empire remain with us, from the coffee in your cup to the food on your table, from the way we think about public spaces to the maps of the modern Middle East. The Ottoman legacy continues to shape our lives. But perhaps the greatest secret of all is how much history hides in plain sight. The Ottomans were not just warriors or rulers. They were innovators, cultural weavers, and thinkers who left a mark far larger than the borders of their empire. Their story reminds us that history is never as simple as we're taught. It's layered, surprising, stranger than fiction. And if you found this journey into the forgotten side of the Ottoman Empire fascinating, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. Here, we uncover the hidden stories of history, the ones too often ignored, overlooked, or simplified. And there are so many more secrets waiting to be told. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more deep dives into the world's incredible histories.